Alright, this week we're going to go with the miniature version of Kelly Gallup's Nancy P. This is, I don't know what else to say about this one. On the mow, I don't know, hands down, one of the best flies in this color combination here. Not necessarily the color combination, in olive. One of the best flies that I've had. I've caught some phenomenal fish on this pattern. The full-size one, Blackfoot Madison, you know, for some reason, I don't know what it is on the mow, maybe because it's a tailwater. It just seems like the smaller scaled patterns do a little bit better for some reason. But we're going to go ahead and do the miniature version of this one. We did the full-size one a while back. There's a couple differences, not a whole lot of them actually. But we're going to go ahead and get into that, and we'll cover the differences as we go. But we'll get zoomed in, and to start on this, we're going with a size 6 MFC 7050 and gel spun thread as always. They're good stuff, not that goofy Vivus. I can't get on that stuff, I don't know why. Alright, enough of my ranting about thread. Well, not ranting, but offhand comments, I guess. To start on this one, I'm going to take 2 strands, or 2 rubber legs, I guess. This is the Fly Enhancer olive and light olive. It's got a little black in there. I just like the 2-toned legs. Very rarely will I use just a straight color on legs. Not that it makes a huge difference. I just visually I like it a lot more. White's about the only time where I'll go like a straight color. But I'm going to take 2 sets of legs. I'm going to double them over, and then I'm just going to measure this out, the length of the hook. I'm going to leave it a little bit longer. And then I'm going to wind up trimming that back section just a little bit. But when you do this, make sure I'm zoomed in there. When you do this, make your first couple of wraps really, really loose. As you come back over top, if you want to, you can tighten down back here. And you can see those legs, they're somewhat how I want them. I mean, they're a little more wild than I would care for. I would like them laying back softer a little bit. But if you come back to this furthest wrap back here and you cinch down, it's going to blow these legs up. I mean, they're going to be sitting at 90s the whole way back. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to take these and I'm just going to form a little bit of a taper. I'm going to leave it just short. I'm going to leave probably 1/4 of an inch up at the front. Then I'm going to come through, and probably about every 2nd or 3rd wrap, I'm going to put some extra tension on those. If you want to corral these a little bit, just bring everything up underneath. And there you go. I got one sticking up, but once I make my wrap here on the got that one going a little wild, but once I make the wrap with this Estaz here, it'll conform. So this is probably a heavier Estaz than I would like. A lot of times what I'll use is, especially on these minis, is I'll use a just an ice dub. But we're gonna go with the Estaz on this one. Get that tied in, and then bring this up to the front. Like I said, we left probably that 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch in the front. Make sure that that's going to sit how I want it. There we go, it's sitting down now. Like I said, probably that first wrap, it'll just fold that leg down how we want it. Now, I won't, typically, if it's marabou that I'm using for a tail or whatever, my first wrap I'll pinch everything and give that a good secure snug, or a nice snug pull, I'm going to do about 2 or 3, grab your tail, and then stretch this stuff. And now you can see, I mean, those legs, they're sitting right how we want them now. Everything's pretty good. And then I'm just going to start working my way forward, giving a nice pull. Work my way forward. Now remember that we're going to put these legs in the back, so leave right where you left off with your thread. Leave that section right there. I'm going to go back probably 3 wraps. I'm going to secure this. I'm going to pull it tight, and then I'm going to go back forward. And when I pull all of this Estaz back, all of these loose materials, you're going to see that I still have a little bit of hook to work with before my eye to get these rabbit strips in. When I pull this back, and let me backtrack a step here. The reason that you work this through there, you make a little bit of a bump, is so that it keeps those legs separated when it's in the water. If you want to, I've done this on a few before, to where I've just taken a little bit of deer hair and I've spun it and then trimmed it really close, and that really keeps the legs, it gives that crayfish look to it. It keeps the legs from catching one another when they're in the water. So now, like I said, I'm peeling this Estaz back, and you can see I still have probably that 1/8 of an inch. Just going to get a little thread base down there. I still have probably that 1/8 of an inch. Let me zoom in so you can see it a little bit better. I know it's not centered, but we'll get there. There's probably that little bit, yeah, I would say an 1/8 left, to where I'm able to tie these rabbit strips in. I want to measure this out before I get too far. I'm just going to take a little bit off of these rubber legs. Get everything nice and even. Now, we're going into the rabbit strip now. These are going to be the legs going off the side, looking like the pinchers, or imitating the pinchers, I should say. I'm going to take a little bit of this out of there. This is, if I can find the package that these strips came in, these are olive black over light olive. I like having these, you know, just the way that I do with the rubber legs. I like having the two-toned or whatever it may be. I don't like a straight color on these. I don't know why. It's just a personal preference. It honestly really doesn't matter. If you want to go straight olive, that's fine. I just like this a little bit more for some reason. So I'm not going to measure these out. I'm going to have these, well, at a minimum, I want them longer than the rubber legs, but I'll trim those up as I go. Just make sure that they're longer than your rubber legs, and before you tie these in, because they come in the package coiled up sometimes, just take this and give it a quick stretch. That way you can see everything's easy to work with. It's easy to manipulate at this point. Then I'm going to peel some of the hair back, and I'm going to get right to the hide. And I'm just going to, I know you can't see this because I don't, can't see that one because I had it turned away. But I'm just making a little notch in there. It's a little V to where it's easier to tie in. And these ones are 1/8 inch. These aren't the quarter magnums that I use when I tie the full size Nancy. I use the magnums when I do those. These are just the 1/4 inch or the 1/8 inch. The magnums on the minis just get a little bit too bulky in my opinion. They kind of want to run into themselves and wind up separating the material as you're fishing it. So we're going to go right next to the eye. Our eye's still clear, everything's nice and clean yet, and you'll notice that this thing is running right down the center. And I'll flip this around, you'll be able to see it better when I tie the other one in, but you want this running laterally right down your hook. We're going to we'll just get a rough measurement on this one, and I forgot to mention this, I don't like that section, there's a chunk missing. Forgot to mention this one I tied when I was tying the last one in. You want your material, you can see how it all lays down flat and it runs back in one direction. You want your material obviously going back to the rear section of your hook. You wouldn't want to tie it in this way, that way when it catches the water it just peels everything forward and it's gonna counteract what you want it to do. So I'm just going to take a rough measurement on this one. It doesn't need to be perfect. That's in the ballpark right there. So I'm going to trim that, and then same thing, I'm going to put this notch in the hide and peel back some of this first so I have the hide exposed. Just makes it easier to tie in, you get less bulk. Your thread wraps are a little bit cleaner in the front. I'll give you a quick look at that one. That's what we're working with right there. There's the hide. I'm going to turn my vise to the side, and then same thing. I'm going to get this one tied in. Maybe move that forward, give my thread a spin. There we go. Make sure things are pretty well lined up how I had it before. I got a little bit carried away with that hide in the front. It was going to be a little bit too much to get away from the eye of the hook. So we'll just chop a little bit of it off. Give a nice firm thread wrap here. You can see how these things are separated right there. I mean, you have that nice pincher effect that you're looking for on a crayfish. Before I tie this thing off, I'm going to come to this point to where I tied everything in, and I'm going to give one really solid pull on my bobbin. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow those legs to flare out a little bit more than if you just tied these in and just secured them. So we're going to take whip finish and we're done on our back section. And you'll see here, I'll zoom in. It looks a little messy right now because I got the white thread and everything. I'm going to touch this up. It can't work. Just going to touch this up. Dull that white thread down a little bit. And like I said, I'll zoom in and you'll be able to see, hopefully. There we go. You can see to where that eye is still nice and clear. I don't have material going through there. I can still make sure that my articulation wire is going to be able to go through. Make sure that when you tie these in that you don't have that hide sticking out past the eye of the hook. It just makes things really difficult. So if you get in there and really, as you're tying these in and you get right to that eye, you can pull down and it'll actually sink that hide back behind your eye, so that way it's nice and clean. We'll go ahead and get that one out of the way. I'll wait till the end. I'll trim those legs up. I should have done it right there, but it's already out and there's no turning back now. Alright, so back to, or onto our front hook. I'm just going to go ahead and get a good thread base down here. Get everything ready to go. And we'll tie this off. On the full size, I'll stack deer hair. On the miniatures, I do one spin of deer hair and that's it. That's all I do. I don't try and stack it. I do the collar behind the eyes, the stack in front, I trim it, it's done. So I say that so I can make this point that I keep the eyes back a little bit further. These are just regular 5/32 lead eyes. I think these ones are Spirit River. I'm not 100%. I'd have to double check, but yeah, just 5/32 lead eyes. I'm going to get zoomed in a little further here, and then get those secure. Spin them around. Touch a zap. And we're good to go. Now I'll just figure 8 over top of these eyes. I'll come around them again on the underneath side, pull tight, and we'll call that good. We'll work our way to the back. I'm just going to rotate these slightly. That looks good right there. And then we're going to grab our connection wire. I like that one too much, but we'll work with it. We'll throw our wire through here. Bring this down through. Make sure that your curve is staying with you. Make sure that you're working with that curve. Even these out. Give a snug pull on this. And then your wire's kinked. You're good to go. Typically I'd use like a, I don't know, maybe a yellow or a olive bead on this one. I don't know where in the hell they're at, so we're using red. That's what we're going with. It'll all get covered up by the skirt anyhow. As always, make sure that your wire is running parallel. Make sure it's not crossing over on itself. Turn right there. Now we're good to go. With this one, I'll explain this as I get it tied in. Typically I go with the width of the bead as my gauge. I want this one to be a little bit shorter, so I'm going about a half of the width of the bead, as you can see right there. Probably not too well because I'm not zoomed in that far, but know that we're going with about a half of the width of the bead. And once I get this wire secure, I'll take it out of the vise and show you as to the why on this one. We'll get this wire tied in. Bring this around, tie it off. Just doubling over our wire. This, I don't know if I mentioned it, this is a size 4 70-50 MFC hook in the front, 4 and a 6 on this one. When I do the full size, some of them are 2s and 4s. The majority of them I do are probably 1s and 2s. Really makes them a big Nancy on a couple of these. I really just enjoy tying and fishing these big ones, especially when you get on the Blackfoot. But we'll go ahead and whip finish this, and I'll explain the why on this. Oh, wrong way. I'll explain the why on why this connection's a little bit shorter. And what you want, you'll see when this hangs down right like this, that back section is hanging right there. You don't want so much of the side to side as you want the, as I'm doing this, as you want the up and down that a crayfish gives with its back section, or the way that a crayfish swims. There's a lot more up and down than there is side to side on the articulation. When you keep that articulation point tied in closer, you get more of that up and down than you do the side to side. So we'll go ahead and get this out of the way, get that tied in. And before I go further into the front hook, what I'm going to do is just take my razor blade here, and I'm going to go, let me see if I can turn this to the side so it's more visible. Probably not, but we'll give it a shot. So here's the end of these rubber legs right here, right where I'm holding this razor blade. I'm going to move forward just a touch, and I'm going to nick the hide of this rabbit. I'm not pushing all the way through to where I'm cutting the hair. I have everything nice and clean right here. You can see it on this underside. The hide is nice and clean, but I still have this hair moving back here. And that just ensures that this section is going to be, that the pincher section is going to be longer than the antenna or whatever you want to call it here. And then I'm going to line this up. I'm going to make a quick notch right here, and then I'm going to move this out. Just push through that hide again. Like I said, not cutting the actual hair, just pushing through the hide. And now our legs are nice and even, everything's clean. And there's minimal waste, I mean there wasn't a ton. If you want to, you can save that stuff that you cut off and use this for your skirt, but I'm going to wind up using just some of this excess that I have sitting on the bench right now. It's a lot easier than fumbling around with small pieces like that to save just a little bit of material. So back to the gel spun now, and I got a little bit of a mess right there, but everything's good. I'm going to take this and advance it forward just slightly. Now all of these small pieces that you have right here, this is going to wind up being your skirt. I'm not working with the hide on this one, I'm just pulling back the actual fur, and that's going to be what I tie in for the skirt. I'm going to do one on the side, or one on each side, and then I'm going to do one over the top. You can omit the one over the top if you want to. I don't think it's really necessary. I just like that it covers it up a little bit more. So like I said, one on each side. This one's a little bit longer, I like that one better. One on each side, make sure you're covering up your bead, you're bleeding back into the pincher section, right where you tie those in. You can see we have a pretty nice cover right there. I'm not going to tie that one in on the top, I'm just going to leave it as it is. On the minis, I guess you can get away with that a little bit better. The full-size ones, I definitely go over the top, but I'm going to leave that one as it sits. It looks pretty clean as it is right there. Next up, let me see if I can find it here. I'm going to go with some brassy-sized yellow or pale yellow wire, and I'm going to tie this in. This is going to be what catches and traps our hackle. I'm going to get that tied in. Double this over as always. Get that cleaned up. And then we'll tie in our Estaz on the front section. Peel this material back to where you're just tying in the cotton. That way it doesn't have a ton of bulk in here. Take that all the way up to the front. Go ahead and whip finish, or not whip finish, but we'll half hitch. One, 2. Go ahead and pull tight. Anchor that down. Give it 2 to 3. Anchor. 2 to 3. Anchor. Now, leave yourself some room to work with. Don't go right up to the eyes on this one. Give yourself a little bit to work with. And we're going to stay probably, once again, about 1/8 of an inch behind these eyes. And then we're going to tie in our saddle. This is just olive and black barred. Saddle from MFC. Let me get the package open here and I'll show you what we're working with. This is what we got right here. Like I said, when I did the mini dungeon, on these smaller scaled flies, I love working with this stuff. The size, the proportion, everything seems to be just right. So I tend to work with these a decent amount. The color is slightly off from what I would like it, but you'll see once we get it wrapped in, it's going to blend in pretty well. I'd like it to be more of an olive brown than this straight olive, but I'll live with it. So we're just going to take this and we're going to go 1, 2, then start working our way back. Get right back to the end of this. Grab your wire and we're going to counter wrap. Just rip this right up to the front. And get the junk scissors. And we'll find this excess that I have right here from the saddle. Trim that off real quick. Everything's looking clean, everything's looking pretty good. Now, the last thing that we have on this before we work with the deer hair is going to be rubber legs. Even on these smaller ones, I still like going with 3 rubber legs. And I got 2 sections of 2 here, so I'm going to steal one. Even on these smaller ones, I still like going with the 3 legs. Just lay these in, and they're going to be laying right behind our lead eyes. Just give this 1, 2 loose wraps, figure 8 that over the top, give the 1 wrap in front, set your eyes where you want them right now, and then just pull straight down. These things are locked into place, they're not going anywhere for you. And then what I'll do is just measure these out. I just eyeball this. I mean, I want them going back almost to the rabbit strips that we tied in for the back hook. Let me get these beads out of the way before I knock them over and have a freaking mess. And then I'm going to take a straw here and I'm going to set this over the top, get my rubber legs out of the way, everything. I have a nice clean area to work with around these eyes. I'm not worried about chopping off a rubber leg or anything like that. And then we're going with the primo deer hair. Let me find my stacker. Now, with this, it's not a dungeon, it's not a sculpt and imitation, so your hair is going to be a little more sparse than what it would be if we were tying a dungeon or a cougar or anything like that. So we're working with a little bit less material. I may have too little here. I'm going to take a look at this once I get it next to the hook and see if I'm going to be alright with it or not. Yeah, that'll work. It's probably on the verge of being too short or too little, but I'm gonna take it. I'll work with it. Same thing as always on this. I measure this out between the hook point and the barb of the hook. On these Nancy's, I stay a little bit closer to the hook point than I do the barb, just because, like I said before, it's not a sculpin. It's not really pronounced pectoral fins. So I'll keep these a little bit shorter than I will on the sculpins, or I will on the dungeons or the cougars. So you can see, I mean, we're falling pretty close on the majority of these to where they're right at the point of the hook. And then I'm going to come up to the front. I'm going to find my middle section here. Clean out this deer hair the best I can. It's so dry this winter. I got so much static in the house. Anytime I work with marabou or deer hair, I just got static going everywhere, so it's a little difficult. Take a little bit more than what you worked with on your collar. And I should probably have no, that's probably pretty good. I'm going to cut these tips. And I'm going to find the middle section of the hair. Same thing. One loose wrap, two loose, letting that thread start to disappear into that deer hair a little bit more. Then we'll go ahead and get a third, and then this is just a complete spin all the way around. And I'm starting to cut a little bit of it there. I'm going to back this off. I know when I start trimming it, it's going to be a mess. Pulled a little too tight with that gel spun, and I cut some of that hair, so we're going to do a take two on this. Pulled a little bit too tight. It was actually good. As I was seeing that spin, I realized that it was a little more sparse than I wanted it, so it'll allow me to grab a little bit more and make this fly look a little bit better. Get some of that junk out of there. Get everything lined up. And just like before, we're going to find this center section on this hair bundle and the center section of what we have left between the eyes, the lead eyes, and the eye of the hook. We're going to go 1, 2, and Knox is going to yell at people. Get a couple more wraps in there, and I'm just going to peel everything back. Find the eye of this hook. And then we'll whip finish. Everything's nice and clean. Now just find this comb. We'll just run this through here real quick, stand up all of the stuff that we have sitting around. And I'm going to find a good clean razor blade here. Oh, this one's good. Now the difference between the Nancy and the Dungeon, other than, you know, the shorter collar, on the Dungeon I'll take and just give that a nice clean flat cut on the bottom. You want these rounded a little bit. You want the rounded section of the deer hair rounded on the top and the bottom. So I just make this half moon right out of the gate. Push that right back to the collar. Everything looks clean. You get one little section right through there. And I'm just going to work this deer hair. I want this nice and rounded. Bottom's a little bit too pronounced for me, so I'm just gonna trim that up slightly. And you can see we have that nice rounded section on the deer hair work. I'm gonna go through and trim these eyes out. That way I'm able to see them. Good trigger point for the fish are those eyes. And then we're going to peel this straw off, get our rubber legs sitting how we want them. Everything looks pretty clean there. Could have got a little bit more deer hair on that top section. Could have filled that out a little bit. But quite honestly, I mean, once it gets wet, it's going to slick back. Everything's going to be pretty clean on that. It's going to give you the overall effect that you're after. But you can see this collar on this one, not near as bulky, not near as heavy as what we have on the Dungeons or the Cougars or any sculpin imitation. It's a lot more sparse and a little bit shorter as well. You don't want those to give the imitation of a pectoral fin, so that's what we're going to go with on this one. That one quick spin of deer hair on the front, nice rounded edges, or nice rounded on the head, as opposed to the nice flat cut on the bottom that we'll do on the Dungeons. But that is it. That is the mini dungeon, or the miniature Nancy P from Kelly Galloup. If you guys have any questions or comments on this one, as always, leave them with me and I'll get back to you. But thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next fly.